Welcome everybody today to another episode on my podcast. I'm super excited to have Joe Burns with me today from Reformed IT. Thank you so much for joining me, Joe.
No problem. Great to be here.
Thank you. And today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity and various bits and pieces and just having a chat in general about what people can be doing and things to look out for. Before we get into all of that exciting stuff, Joe, please can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your story?
Sure. Thanks, Jeri. So I'm Joe, and I run a business. I co-founded a business called Reformed IT 3 years ago, and we help businesses to manage cybersecurity risk alongside all of the IT aspects of a business to make sure that they're as efficient and productive as they can possibly be using technology. But my background stems in terms of business and IT security back to 2003. I've been in IT security so that makes it pretty much 20 years I've been in the IT security sector. But I started and co-founded a business back in 2005 where we did quite a similar thing and eventually sold that business in 2011. Yes, so
excellent.
That's the background.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So just so everybody knows, Reformed IT look after our IT systems at Smooth Accounting. They're an incredible IT support company, and we've been so thrilled with the support you've given us over the last few years. And having a growing business, obviously that's quite a scary thing because most people don't know much about IT. I don't want to speak for everybody, but as a business owner, like it just freaks me out, and I'm like, I'd rather I want to pay someone and know it's all covered, and I know 100% you guys cover it all. You're brilliant. So I know that I see in the news about like, oh, so-and-so company's been hacked, and there's always like news stories and people kind of pay attention to those things. But I'm assuming like smaller businesses get hacked as well. Like it's not just the huge companies that have loads of data.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, obviously, because I'm known as a cybersecurity specialist, I get calls, usually, unfortunately, after a business has been compromised. So quite often someone will give my contact details to somebody because they've had a hack, they've had a data breach, and maybe an email compromise or ransomware or something like that. And so a local small business will get on the phone and talk to me and say, how do we deal with this situation? And the difficulty is that that's always too late. The damage is done, it's costing them disruption and maybe even a ransom. It depends how good their backups and disaster recovery planning is as a business as to how much impact it has on the company. So yeah, it isn't just the big one. The big ones make the headlines, obviously, because when the news are telling it doesn't sound as impressive if they're talking about a local accountancy firm or a local solicitor's firm.
Put me on the news.
but yeah, the Ubers and the Arnold Clarks of late are always going to make the news headlines because they're big and it impacts a lot of people. But what people don't realize is small businesses do get heavily targeted. One, usually because they're quite easy to go after, and equally, it can still cause a lot of disruption to supply chains. So they're not always going after the big companies, they're going after the smaller businesses that support the big companies in their supply chain as well, quite often that way.
Makes sense. So I know it says in your LinkedIn profile that you are a certified ethical hacker.
Yes.
Please explain to people watching this podcast what that means, because when I hear the word hacker, I think like evil little people in their dark bedroom that like the police are trying to put in prison.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to maintain the stereotype by wearing the hoodie anyway today, so had to do that bit. In terms of a certified ethical hacker and why ethical hackers exist, I like to relate it to a sports analogy, whether football or rugby, some sort of team sport. When you're in a competitive sport and you've got a team, generally the way that you improve your defensive line is by using some of your own team, your best attackers that you've got in your squad, to basically try your defense out, test them out. And that's the point, because if you're using your best attackers, you're looking for weaknesses in the defense, you're looking for how we can improve the defenses by using the best attackers. And this is exactly the same thing that businesses should be doing effectively, but from cybersecurity and their cyber defenses is if you're not getting any practice, if you're not looking for weaknesses in your defense, then how are you going to improve? How are you going to make things better? So that's why a role of an ethical hacker or pen tester exists, is you're basically trying out the defenses to make improvements, constant improvements.
So like a company might say to you, like, try and hack our systems.
Yeah, that is, I mean, we do quite a lot of that as well, in terms of trying to expose vulnerabilities and expose the issues that a business has, and then plug in those gaps and fill in those holes before the bad guys get to them. Essentially, if there's two people, if there's only one person in the race and that's a bad guy, they're going to win. You need someone on your side as well. So yeah, that's basically why we're constantly looking at defenses. And the other thing to bear in mind with an ethical hacker is we're using all the same techniques and tools and things that the hackers have got their hands on. So we're trying all the same things, because ultimately if they've got them, we need to be able to use the same things and expose the same risks.
Yeah, definitely. And I've said this before on other podcasts that I got hacked in the very early days of my accountancy business, very, very early. I just started, and a ransomware attacked my system and just destroyed everything. It encoded everything, and I had no idea what was even happening. Like it didn't even register to me that anything was really wrong until I kind of, even though everything looked different, every file name looked different, I was like, oh, I can't open things. That's weird. And like, I didn't really even have any IT support and, no security at all on my machine. And I just lost everything. And I'm actually really glad that happened. And I'm glad it happened literally when I first started my business, because I didn't really lose anything catastrophic. Like I was able to just carry on. It was fine. It was pain, but like, imagine if that happened now. Like, I just can't even imagine, just, and that's why obviously we have you guys looking after our IT, because I know that wouldn't happen. But I'm so glad that did happen to me. And I say to people, I was so naive, and I was literally just there in my little garage with my laptop, just do all these accounts, and then boom, ransomware. And I thought OneDrive would, because I had everything in OneDrive. Like, I was like, well, it's fine because it's in OneDrive, so they'll just give me everything back. And they just didn't want to know. They were
I mean, that's a good point. A lot of people a lot of businesses have moved to Microsoft 365 and they're storing data in OneDrive and SharePoint and things like that, rather than having them on a file server in their building. But you're still responsible for that data, even though somebody else is storing it for you on their equipment in the cloud, which is somebody else's building. If somebody else is storing that data, the responsibility is still yours for the data. And even though you can get it back, let's say you lose your laptop one day and you had everything in OneDrive. Yeah, it's really convenient because you can install OneDrive on the new computer and all your files reappear. That's great, but it doesn't stop things that damage the files at the source. So if you've been ransomed and they've affected your OneDrive or your SharePoint data, it's still going to affect that data, and you're still going to have to use backups. Now, Microsoft do a limited amount, same with Google, any of these cloud providers, they're not ultimately responsible for your data, and they'll only do a limited amount of kind of version control. It's not really a backup. They'll do some version control and things like that. So it is down to every business to make sure they've got a proper backup in place, even for cloud applications like Microsoft 365 and Google Apps. It's really important. So it's a great point.
For like a business like ours, so we've got like 14, 15 staff. We have an office, but we don't have a server. I think we don't have a server. And everybody works from like sometimes from home or wherever they might be, and then sometimes in the office, and everyone's got their own laptop. How are we protected from like threats like being hacked?
So the big thing, and what I try to say to people all the time, is there is no one single thing that can stop everything. It's about a layered approach, and quite often I use an analogy of a physical building. If you're protecting a physical building, you'll have layers of security control, and it will depend on how important the building is, how important the valuables within the building are as well as to how much you put in. So even if you take a typical house, you leave the house and you lock the door, that's one measure of security control you have. Some people will have alarm systems.
Unless you live in Dubai, I don't even have a key for this house. I've never locked it once. None of us lock it. We don't know where the key is. So yeah, but in the UK, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it also depends probably where in the UK as well.
Yes, yeah.
But that's this thing. You've got different risks, with the physical building controls, you're locking your door. You might have an alarm system. Some people have probably put CCTV on the outside of their house as well, just to to be an additional deterrent and a early warning system if there's a potential threat. You could even have your alarm monitored by a 24/7 security company. If you've got valuables in your house, you might put them in a safe as well. If you've got nice jewelry and watches, you'll put them in a safe because there's an additional protection there. So it's all about layered controls for the potential risk. And as I say, if there's something valuable, you want that locked away even more with an additional control. But ultimately, getting in depends on so getting into that building and those valuables depends on how much somebody wants to get in. I mean, at the end of the day, you can have all these kind of systems, and if someone turns up to the building with a bulldozer and knocks the wall down, and they're in. So the effort that's applied can get people into the building. It generally depends on how much they want to get in and how valuable your stuff is as to how much control you need in place, essentially. So
yeah, and that's so true. Like, sadly, a friend of ours got robbed. Their house got robbed a couple of months ago, just before Christmas, and incredible house and really sad what happened. And they had security and everything, and we were talking about it, and they were saying, if they want to get in, they'll get in. And it's like, even when we were talking at our last house to a front door supplier, and they were going through the different levels of security you can get on this front door. So you can have obviously different kinds, the different locking systems and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, I get it. I absolutely get having a really secure front door, and we did go for one. But I just think as well, someone's just only got to smash a window. Do you know what I mean? There's only so much you can do. So
and that helps. I think that helps analogy to some degree. Some people spend all of their IT budget on that big steel front door, and they don't do anything for the windows, and they don't do anything else inside. So I think when it comes to IT security, you've got to have a well-layered approach to defend everything. You can't just go, we've got the best endpoint protection in the world. It's the best of that. So we don't need to worry about the risk of phishing, email, social engineering, all those kind of other ways that people can get in. So I think that's a great way to bring into the analogy. In terms of businesses and what businesses can actually do from an IT security point of view, obviously there's lots of layers, and it's attacking all of those and getting them all in place. But there's things like, I say, email, protecting your email, trying to stop the threat from coming through email. It's your devices, making sure that the endpoint protection or antivirus solution is good and it is detecting quite well. Traditional antivirus is no longer good enough. If it looks at a file to work out whether that file's bad just based on a characteristic, that's not exactly good enough today. There's so many different files, so it's about looking at the behavior and the risk that's happening on that machine. Then there's things like training, cybersecurity and cyber awareness training, because that is another layer. If somebody's trying to social engineer an individual, it doesn't matter about your IT systems. We've had examples of clients where they've been done by somebody sending a spoofed email to somebody, pretending to be the boss, and then asking for a mobile number so they can WhatsApp them. Then they WhatsApp them, but they change the name to the boss's name on WhatsApp. Do you know, if you haven't got the number, you can change the name to whatever you want. And it looks like it's that person. That's over WhatsApp and on a personal phone. And then they've messaged and said, I need you to go and buy some vouchers. And people have followed these instructions. There is nothing really from an IT perspective that we can do to stop that. It's just the individual has to recognize that that's a scam. And so user education and awareness training is also one of the layers, and it's important. Again, we could go on. There's loads and loads of layers. The one thing, obviously, for people watching who want to understand how to mitigate a lot of their cybersecurity risk and want to look at where they're at the moment, we've actually created a scorecard So it might be a link worth posting, but
Yeah,
we've got a
100%. Well,
scorecard.
we'll pop the link, guys, in the description so you can have a look at that.
Yeah. And then it basically asks 12 questions, and it helps to build a personalized report to help businesses to understand what they need to do to implement these layers of control to help defend themselves, basically.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That'll be really useful for people. Thank you for that.
No
Because and it's funny you should say that about training and stuff. Again, I got another kind of scam got me. We were in our old offices, I got an email from my landlord saying they changed their bank details for the rent payment to be made to. So I just amended it, paid on my bank system, paid it to the new bank details I was given. Scam, it wasn't my landlord. And I was so annoyed with myself because, but it had come from my landlord's email address. So it wasn't even like they'd used a very slightly, one character different. They'd got into his emails and emailed from it. And he'd emailed me about a year prior to actually change his bank details. So that was legitimate. And I'd mended them and he was like, oh, thanks so much. And so it was totally within character. We always corresponded on email. We never spoke on the phone. Like I would have no reason to think that wasn't him.
Yeah, I think that's a great time to mention one of the latest things that we're seeing, because like you say, the problem is hackers are targeting people's inboxes, right? They're targeting people's email accounts on 365 and Google, because if they can compromise somebody's account, then they can start to send emails from that person to people that they communicate with on a day-to-day basis, on a regular basis, which then makes it more difficult for somebody to identify, because if it's coming from a genuine person about a genuine subject, including an invoice or a payment or anything like that, that they've got all that information. They know exactly what the payment amount should be and what it's for and everything. And they send an email saying, can our bank details change? Can you send it to this? At this point, the person receiving it, as far as they're concerned, nothing is actually wrong. And in terms of security awareness, we're saying, oh, make sure it's from the right sender and it's about a real thing. Those all apply in this case. But whenever there's somebody asking to do something that's outside of routine, anything to do with financial transaction, changing account details, anything like that, we always say absolutely verify it. Pick up the phone, talk to the person and verify it.
It takes 2 seconds, doesn't it? Like, hi, did you send me an email to change your bank details? No, I didn't. Right, okay, that's fine. I was so annoyed, and like the Santander didn't give me the money back either, which I was really annoyed about, because they were like, oh, you did it, and whatever. So I was annoyed about that. But it's just, for me, like I'm a relatively intelligent person, like, normally, and for that, I've been hit by ransomware. I've been scammed out of, it was £1,800, it's a lot of money. And that security training that we do, that you guys send round to us, and I know all the team do it, like it's little snippets, little 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and it's just like, don't forget, this might not be, things to look out for, this might not be genuine. And stuff like that. I think you've absolutely got to train your team, because the users, the people doing the work, they're the ones that are going to probably be targeted. So it's so important that your team have the training, like, as human beings, we make mistakes. It's just the way it is.
And that's the thing as well. There is going to be a lapse of judgment. So security training is important, but you need other layers and controls to try and mitigate the risk wherever possible as well. But the one thing on cyber awareness training, one common thing we've seen is individuals being targeted in their first week at starting at a company. So we're seeing this a lot. And it's generally because they know that they're new, they're impressionable, they maybe don't know the structure of the business properly yet, or how people do things in the business, so they're more prone to mistakes. And so what they tend to do, the hackers and the social engineers, they're targeting people that are starting in their first week, and then quite often doing those voucher scams, emailing them to try and create a conversation, saying, oh, you can claim this back on your expenses and all that sort of stuff. So what a lot of our clients have done as well now, because the odd client has been individuals within these businesses that have joined have been scammed within the first week of starting, because obviously they put on social media that somebody started and there's the information. And so what a lot of our clients do now is they don't even give people access to an email account until they've done some introductory training on cybersecurity to be aware of these kind of risks and things as well.
That's a really good idea, actually. Might steal that one. So we use Microsoft, obviously, as you know, Microsoft 365 and everything. What would you say are the kind of latest threats for Microsoft 365? How are people being compromised? What should they look out for?
Yeah, so I've done a video on LinkedIn recently about this, so you can see a full demo on my profile. I've pinned it as well for anyone that does want to watch the detail. But the big thing we're seeing at the moment is multi-factor authentication bypass techniques using session hijacking. I know I'm using a lot of like techie terms, so let's break this down a little bit. So everybody has been told by security experts like me that you should be using multi-factor authentication on everything that's cloud enabled, particularly Microsoft 365. Now, when we're talking about the analogy of a safe, this is your golden jewels, right? It's got everything in it for your business, your emails, a lot of files, and so you need to keep that safe. So multi-factor authentication has been the gold standard up until now, in terms of if you have multi-factor authentication, it means that you need something besides just a username and password to gain access. So a username, password, and maybe a mobile app and a push notification, or a code, a one-time code, or a text message, something like that. So with that, it generally stops hackers, because if they steal a username and password from you, which is generally quite easy to do, they could phish you or watch you type it in, or any other various techniques that hackers can use to steal your password. If they have that information, then all they need to do is enter that and they've got access to your systems. Multi-factor authentication prevents that, because they don't have that other factor. They don't have your mobile app or your mobile number or anything like that. But what the hackers are now doing to get into accounts, even protected by multi-factor authentication, is they're doing something called session hijacking. So how this works is, Jeri, if I was to email you with a phishing email that looked like, let's say I'm sending you a OneDrive file, right, and it looks genuine, and you click it and it says, right, to access this file you need to sign into Microsoft 365. Again, all pretty standard stuff. When you go to sign in on that page, it's not just a page to capture usernames and passwords. What this is doing is sending you to the real Microsoft website, but where the hacker has got their server in between you and Microsoft 365. It's kind of called man in the middle. So they're sat watching everything that's happening. And then if you sign in, it'll ask you to verify yourself using multi-factor authentication, and you'll do that. And then as it logs in, the session cookie, which I'm going to explain in more detail in a second, that is sent back to your device, is then captured by the hacker, and then they are you, basically. They've got your account. They don't need your username and password. They don't need your multi-factor authentication. They have just signed in as you somewhere completely different. And that's how they're doing it. And this works by stealing this session. And as you've probably seen, if you go on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and you open it in a web browser, it will be open and it will stay open. You won't have to sign in every hour. You won't have to sign in every day. It just stays open. It stays logged in. And that's done by using a session cookie. So when you've signed in for the first time, they give you a file for that device to say you've authenticated. Once you've got that file, I trust you. I'll let you have access. And that's what they're basically intercepting. Because once they've captured that file on the way back to you, and they don't hand it to you, they take it, then they've basically resumed your session. And that's how it works. So that's the latest thing we've seen over the last few weeks, that we've seen more and more businesses being compromised on Microsoft 365. And when I get that call saying, oh, we've had a breach, and then I say, by the way, none of our clients have been done so far.
Just to make that clear.
Yeah, just to make it clear. These are usually people that have been like recommended to speak to us. But when they call up, I say, oh, we should have had multi-factor authentication enabled. And they said, yeah, we have. So then we've investigated it a bit more and looked at the threat. And this is the one that I demo. And it is, they're bypassing it completely. They don't need to worry about multi-factor authentication anymore.
It's crazy, because it's almost like, and I'm assuming this is the case, it's almost like every time you come up with an idea that is more protective, like multi-factor authentication, like they'll find a way to break it, then you'll come up with some, not you, whoever comes up with a new, it's like the banks to come up with a new security way for you to access your account, then that gets compromised and they have to come, it's just continual, like all the time.
And the reality is attackers are always going to be ahead. The attackers are always going to find a problem and they're going to use that problem. And then only when it's become known that that's a problem is it going to get defended against. So there's always that window of opportunity where they find an issue and they're exploiting that issue. And then it takes a while for people to implement the defense to stop it. And that's why compromisers will never stop. These things will never stop because there's always going to be that window of opportunity for the hackers, basically.
Ugh, I hate them.
I was going to say,
not so the ethical hackers. I don't hate them. Just the real hackers.
The other thing to mention is that, and you touched on this earlier, we're now in a world, unlike, like, let's say 2 decades ago, where everything was in your office. You had a server in the office. That's where your files and your emails were, and people went into the office to do their work, and they couldn't really easily access their work outside of that office. People had to go to the office. Obviously, over the last couple of decades, that's changed, and it was accelerated somewhat by COVID, because any businesses that were still holding on to that legacy way of working were forced to change and to basically make it so that they could work from anywhere more easily. Now, being able to work from anywhere brings its own challenges, because the reality is that back then, unless you were in the building, you couldn't access somebody's data and you couldn't compromise their systems unless you were in. Now, people expect to be able to get access to all of their data and all their applications and all their systems from basically anywhere. Now, the one thing that we've been doing, and I'm sure you'll have been contacted by our team about this.
I was going to mention this. Go on, you do it.
But yeah, one of the things that we're trying to do is mitigate risk by going, well, realistically, does your business need global access? Do you need China or Russia or any other country to be able to access your systems? Do you really need people to be able to log in from those locations? Because in all of the cases we've seen where we've spoken to our clients, generally businesses only need to access data from maybe the UK, in your case, UK and Dubai. So there are, but usually we've got businesses with UK and US offices, and sometimes people do travel a bit further and they need to work. But the idea is, if you don't need to access your systems globally, then why are you having it available to the whole world? I mean, ultimately, you're allowing a hacker from anywhere in the world to basically try and get into your systems. So we've started to apply something called conditional access policies to all of our clients to help limit and reduce the risk by just focusing on allowing people to log in locations where we know that they're based, or we know the people are using a device that's trusted or in a location that's trusted. So that's what we're starting to do to try and, put more barriers up and make it more difficult for the hackers.
Yeah, and that's great. Just like things like that, like you say, if you don't need it, what's the point? It's just another way. And I think that's where having a good IT support company, on your side is so important. Like you mentioned earlier about people will contact you when they've been hacked, and it's almost like too late, and we get that a lot. We get a lot of new clients that have got a tax investigation or like a whole investigation for corporation tax, VAT, everything, and they're absolutely panicking, and obviously we'll help them and we'll do everything we can, but it's we want to be preventative of these things. We don't want to, and it's a lot of, I'm assuming your industry is similar to mine, that a lot of stuff is done behind the scenes. It's not necessarily things that you can see. It's not, our services are not tangible, really. And you guys are located nowhere near us. We're really far south and you're very far north. So we've never met in person, but you look after everything remotely and very, very well. And the same with our clients. They're spread throughout the country, but everything we do behind the scenes, no one necessarily sees that, but that's where a lot of the value is. We've literally, employ the most qualified people. We go through the most internal checks, all these things we're doing. You just see maybe a set of accounts at the end of it. Your clients just see, well, our computer switches on and works. Do you know what I mean? So it's fine. And it's only when actually what we're doing is preventing if you do get an investigation, then we don't mind, because we're just like, yeah, great, here it all is. You know, we're good with it, kind of thing. Whereas so many accountants can't say that. And it's almost the same with IT. It's like, you only need it when you need it, really, when things go wrong.
Yeah, generally it can be a bit of a thankless task, IT, because like you say, generally people see IT support, and although the phrasing, the wording for this industry has changed somewhat, like we don't call ourselves really an IT support business anymore. I mean, because a lot of our job is to try and keep our clients safe, but IT support is, you know, part of the service and what we do. But our core focus is, how do we prevent our clients from being hacked? How do we keep them working more efficiently? How do we make sure that they can work more flexibly? And those are the things that we're actually providing for our business. But because people have got in their head that they're looking for an IT support type service, generally they then value it based on how much they need to talk to them, but that's the wrong thing to value.
That is absolutely the wrong thing to value.
If you're going, oh, we're basing it on how much we actually use you to call up because we've got problems, that's not really value. The value is keeping your systems running, keeping them safe, keeping them efficient. That's where the value is in a service provider. So
definitely. And I feel that's a great kind of place to wrap up as well, in terms of your ideal clients, what you guys are looking for in an ideal client, and who you can best help with your support services.
So currently, we are, I wouldn't say niche, we're not niche, but we're quite concierge in the services that we offer. We don't try and offer our services to loads of people, because it would become diluted. We want to do the best job for a smaller number of businesses. So that said, we do work with a lot of businesses that are between 20 employees and 200 employees. That's kind of the window. Our average number of employees of clients is around about 45 at the moment, and we deal with a lot in the accounts and finance industry. We actually have a wealth management client on our books that are managing billions of dollars. I'm saying dollars because it sounds better. Billions of pounds worth of investment. Billions of pounds worth of investment funds for on behalf of, like, you know, high net worth individuals. So, and they're in a heavily regulated industry, so we look after people like that. We also deal with a lot of manufacturing firms, because IT becomes critical to their operation. And it's funny, the chain of effect that happens, because we're looking after manufacturing firms that deal with the supply chain, and ultimately that you see at the end, the people that get their services that rely on what we do is so impactful. So I'd say manufacturing, finance, solicitors. We do a lot in the legal sector. Anywhere from 20 to 200 employees who value good service and value IT security, and not having to deal with situations after it's too late, basically.
And like, I cannot stress enough, having been through being hacked and everything in my business journey, how important it is to have good IT support. I know you're not calling yourselves that anymore, but you know, it's so important. And, you know, Smooth Accounting, love working with you guys. You're always so helpful, no matter who we speak to. Everyone's so helpful, resolves whatever it is. And like I say, we've never met. Do you know what I mean? You're like, you've never needed to come to our offices. Everything's done remotely, which is great for us as well. And so huge testimonial from us for you guys, and thank you for everything you do for us, and thank you for being on my podcast.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for being such a great client and supplier as well. So
thank you. We're also their accountant as well. I must get that in at the end. It's been awesome. Thank you, Joe, and hopefully it's been useful to everybody. I'll make sure the link is in the description. Remind everyone, Joe, what it is.
So it's a scorecard. It'll ask you 12 questions. It'll help you to identify where you might be weak or strong in certain areas for cybersecurity, and give you a personalized report on that.
Everyone should do that anyway. Like, just do it, just in case there's some areas they could need help with. So I'll pop that link below. You can find Joe if you do have a company with sort of 20 plus employees and you're looking for better IT support. You can find Joe Burns on LinkedIn as well, and we'll also put your contact details and Informed IT's details in the description as well. Thanks so much, and I'm sure I'll speak to you soon.
No doubt. Speak to you later. Thanks, Jeri. Bye.